Okay, folks, I'm going to record. I'm going to just run through these real quick, and if I want to talk about it, I'll do that after. Okay. Again, the crime that's being committed here is we never went after the perfect Bible. We went after the preservation that we already had. Instead of going after the perfect Bible, which what we should have did was we should have updated the King James to the perfect Bible. But instead of going after the perfect Bible, what did we do? We made Bibles go against the King James. And if you read down in history, even those people on that side of the philosophy fence will be honest with you and say, yes, the Revised Standard Version and the American Standard Version that came out, the first that came out, were to go up against the King James. They will be honest and tell you that. Okay? So, that was the big crime that started it all right there. Whether you want to blame that on Westcott and Hort or somebody else around that time, that's where it began, when we decided the King James was not the preservation. This is why I cannot take James White seriously, because he is constantly, him and other people like Mark Ward are constantly trying to say that there's been no preservation until when? Oh, the preservation is the way James White looks at the scriptures and just scratching out the King James and the Textus Receptus. Just scratch it off. And that's preservation? No, it's not. Preservation either includes the King James and the Textus Receptus, or, in my opinion, it is the preservation. The Textus Receptus and the Masoretic texts are the preservation of God's Word. Okay? Byzantine majority text, whether that came before or after, that's icing on the cake too. But the preservation was with God, was doing with Erasmus, and I believe that with all my heart. The real danger again is the fact that we only see one side of the spectrum, and you're trying to make it that way. We're trying to take everybody's eyes off the King James and the preservation going all the way back then, like this MEV Bible here. We're trying to take people's mind off of that and put it on these new things where the church has already been decided, the Bible has already been decided, and we're trying to take our minds and the minds of our children off of what God has already preserved for us and put it on new things. That's very dangerous. And this idea of totally abolishing or updating or getting rid of the Textus Receptus is dangerous as well. That's a big danger. God's Word was already preserved between 1500 and 1700s. A good translation from the wrong book, says Kent Hovind. Kent Hovind was holding up a New American Standard, or actually an American Standard. It was a paperback form. He said it was one of the best Bibles that's ever came into the mix. But he said it's a great translation from the wrong book. I think he meant wrong translation from the wrong, a good translation from the wrong text. Okay, that's what he said. And that lets me know that, again, taking us back up to the top, we could have went after the perfect Bible, which would have been a Bible where we did not tamper with the King James. We just added to it what our findings were, and we put that, like the Net Bible, we put the notes, the commentary in our Bible. And that would have been the perfect Bible, instead of destroying what God is already giving us, or trying to cover it up and leave it on the back burner. What we should have did was we should have added what we were finding to it, because, well, I don't think Westcott and Hort and many others around that time expected the King James to still be the #1 bestseller today. So maybe that's why they really wanted to replace the King James. That takes us back to the first danger. I hope that James White and Mark Ward aren't trying to do the same thing, as they lie to us and say that Mark Ward says King James is one of his favorite translations. He takes it with him everywhere he goes, but yet he's made videos making fun of it, even comedy videos, making fun of it and saying all kinds of manner against it, calling it unintelligible, and saying that you shouldn't let a child read a King James and different things. Very dangerous. But I do believe with all my heart that the preservation of God's Word is in that circle of the Textus Receptus, coming from the 1500s, maybe even before the 1500s, all the way from the Tyndale and the Wycliffe all the way to the 1769 King James. That's the preservation. Nobody burned at the stake for the New American Standard or the NIV or RSV or the CSB or the ESV or none of y'all. The preservation and the fight for the Bible all happened during the creation of the King James Bible and the release of the Textus Receptus. Okay? Consistency is an issue with, as I was watching Robert Breaker, consistency is an issue with the modern versions. Okay, consistency. If you get a Bible and it's got cross references in it, do that with a modern version and then do it with a Textus Receptus version, and you'll see that consistency is not in the modern versions. Okay, and they even have changed the concordances and turned them into other types of index. Why? Because everything is said differently. There is no consistency. That's why a lot of the newer Bibles today are getting rid of the concordance and putting a subject index in there, because concordances indicate consistency. You can take a word and follow that same word all through the Bible, and that word will show you how it means the same thing or something different in certain places, and it will show you a complete collage of Bible study. But these modern versions are getting rid of the concordance and making subject indexes because they don't have the consistency that the older versions of the Bible had. Okay? In the King James, MEV, New King James, I was just watching Robert Breaker, and the same consistency that he was reading out of the King James is also in my MEV translation. Okay? Consistency. KJV onlyists, this is for you. If the Bible before the KJV, if the Bibles before the KJV, all the Bibles that came from the same Textus Receptus tradition, if they were legit, Robert Breaker, why not the Bibles after 1769? This is just as much the same and just as much different as the King James. Just like the difference between the King James and the Geneva, so is the difference between the MEV, New King James, and the King James. It's the same difference. Some things were made better, some things the King James are better. But it's the same Textus Receptus. Why are King James onlyists getting religious about this? And they're saying, oh, well, there's no more preservation after 1769. That's where I totally disagree, and that's where I cannot be a King James only, because of the fact that we are still making Textus Receptus Bibles. Best thing that ever happened to me. Okay? That is why I cannot be King James only. Now, if King James had stopped at 1769, maybe I would be King James only. I don't know. But the fact that this Bible is not that much different than the King James, than the Geneva, or the Young's Literal Translation, or the Great Bible, or whatever. This is in that same chain of Textus Receptus philosophy. So, and it's consistent, and all the verses match. So I don't understand why King James onlyists don't want to continue the preservation. They wanted to stop at 1769. That's where they turn into a cult at. And I just don't tolerate that. That's why I'm not King James only. Because there's other Bibles that are Textus Receptus and that are updates to the King James. And whether they agree with that or not, I followed Robert Breaker along with my MEV while he was reading the King James and criticizing all the modern versions. This doesn't say what the modern versions say. This says what the King James says. But he, without looking at it and studying it, he won't be honest about it. He's not going to be honest about it. Okay? And last but not least, Robert Breaker said something very, very interesting, though. He said that the modern versions of today come from a different fountain. And that is what Doug was trying to say when he was having this debate with James White. Okay? He said that there's two, basically what he wanted to say is there's two different fountains. There's one that was on the side of Westcott and Hort that wanted to change the Bible, and the other side wanted to preserve what was already there. One side wanted to change, and the other side wanted to preserve what was already there. That is two different fountains. That's two different philosophy. That's two different sides of the wall. Doug was right about that, and James White would not talk about that. He said there's no such thing. I'm going to move on to such and such and such and such. Well, James White, you should have lost the debate right there. Because and the guys that were in the after party watching the debate, they said that James White should have addressed that. Let's talk about the two sides. But that's where we go back up to the top here to the real danger. The real danger is there is two sides, and you're only hearing one. You're only reading one. That's bad. Okay? Again, the right fountain. I do believe that the right fountain of biblical philosophy is the King James and all its minions before and after it. I got my New King James here. My MEV. I got my New King James. I got a bunch of these. This is New King James. This is New King James. And I got about, 3, 4, 5 more over there. I'm a New King James freak, as you can see. But I love this MEV. This claims to actually be an update to the King James. But a lot of people on both sides are not calling it that. So, okay. But if you're not on the right side of the philosophy, you're wrong. And if you're King James only, obviously you're going to be wrong. So, But I'm going to stop there, and I may look through these notes again and decide that I want to talk about this. But I'm getting tired of the long videos. So that's another one down. Thank you for watching. And I will talk to you soon with more if I want to talk about this more. God bless.